Hello, history buffs. Well, this is the final module in our summer session, but I hope you've enjoyed the class. And today we're talking about the Reformation. The Reformation seems like just a religious dispute, but it actually spirals out and totally reimagines the way that politics works in Europe. Where the Hundred Years' War, which I discussed in Module 14, changed the way the state operated, collected taxes, and funded its military, the Reformation changed the way the state interacted with religion, and changed from the ancient and medieval practice of religion being integral to the state to a state where religion was mostly secondary. So today I want to focus on an issue that neither my readings nor John Green really talks about: the Catholic Counter-Reformation, or simply the Catholic Reformation. The Catholic Church did not take Luther sitting down. Instead, they responded by a series of sweeping reforms instituted at the Council of Trent from 1548 to 1555. They instituted a series of reforms that they hoped would allow them to compete with Protestantism on Protestantism's terms. So they reformed the way the Mass operated, the way that priests were educated, and the way organizations like the Franciscans and the Dominicans operated. But the gist of these reforms was not to concede theological issues with Protestants. They never budged on indulgences or purgatory or any of the other issues that Luther and Calvin had. Instead, they focused on changing the way priests interacted with the laity, continuing on with the innovations that Francis started in the 12th century and 13th century. They decided to focus on the education of the laity and ministry directly to the laity as a way for them to compete with the pamphleteering that Protestants had been using. So remember, the Protestant Revolution was successful not because it was totally new. Luther nor any of his contemporaries were the first people to debate theological issues. Instead, it was successful because it was the first one that actually reached down to the popular level. And the Counter-Reformation used the same approach, but they did it within the hierarchy of the church. So starting with parish priests and friars, and particularly a new religious order, a priestly religious order called the Jesuits, the church wanted to have priests engaging with their congregations about why theological issues are important. And that started by educating the priests. And this was where the Jesuits really succeeded. They were founded in the 1540s by a man named Ignatius of Loyola. And he was a Spaniard who was born just as the Reconquista was ending. But he still had that crusading spirit. So he viewed the education of priests and laity as his own crusade, and he turned his religious order towards that and towards missionary work in India and the Far East. So this is the best example of the way the Counter-Reformation worked. They used the printing press to educate priests, and priests used their education to discuss theological issues like the use of art in the liturgy, the belief in purgatory, and the seven sacraments to the people, allowing another step for people to get more personally involved in their religion, and opening up the clergy to their people. So while they didn't approach all the issues that Luther had, they did solve one issue, which was the alienation of clergy from the typical congregation. And it helped people to better appreciate the clergy around them. So as you're reading the material for this week, particularly the words of Luther and Calvin, just consider how the Catholic Church responded to them. Do you think they did a good job? We'll talk about it in discussion.